Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to another insightful program entitled Audit of Core HR Functions. I am your presenter, Andrew Ondari. Talking of core HR functions, these are the core activities or the main activities performed by HR managers. This implies that there is no HR manager who can function effectively without performing these key functions. That means that the HR function cannot be complete without these activities. As I will demonstrate, these are 5 key activities, namely recruitment and onboarding, 2, performance and compensation, and 3, employee relations and benefits. These are key in the sense that an organization cannot do without them. Having said that, I want us to move to the themes for today's program. There are 3 areas or themes that we are going to cover this morning. And these are 1, recruitment and onboarding. Recruitment is the first thing that HR managers do when an organization is new. That we require new employees to start working in an organization that is new. Secondly, recruitment is conducted when the organization is expanding. The organization can be expanding within a country or outside, and therefore we require new employees. 3, we engage in recruitment when there is new technology which cannot be handled by the current employees. And 4, recruitment is done when the current employees do not have the right skills and knowledge that is required or are required for a particular job. Onboarding, on the other hand, is to integrate the employees into the organization so that they can start working as soon as possible. Some could say it is a form of introduction to the organization, which can take up to 3 months, depending on the job, so that employees are aware of 1, policies of the organization, 2, culture of the organization, 3, environment of the organization. With this awareness, they are able to start working and perform to the levels expected. Another theme that we shall look at in this audit is performance and compensation. Performance can be looked at in 2 ways. 1, the output of employees over a particular period of time. This output are the results they produce in relation to goods and services. This performance can be measured both quantitatively and qualitatively. The second way of looking at performance are the behaviors of the employees while they are working. It is expected that employees must demonstrate the right behaviors which are ethical and compliant with the HR policies as well as the code of conduct. On compensation, it is about payment that is given to the employees for work done. There are two ways of looking at compensation. One is the base pay, and two, the variable pay. Base pay are the salaries and wages paid to employees consistently depending on their contract. And this base pay does not change unless there is a salary or wage review to change it. For variable pay, as the word suggests, that this is compensation that changes over time. It can be within a year, 2 years, or more. These variable payments may include financial and non-financial pay, such as bonuses. Bonuses are given to employees for their performance. So there is a linkage between performance and compensation. We will be looking at areas of audit for both performance and compensation and look at the link between these two. And the last theme for this morning is to look at the benefits and employee relations. Benefits are incentives that are given to employees to motivate them. And they may be related to health benefits or retirement benefits. Health benefits may include medical cover, that if an employee is injured or is sick, can be treated at the cost of the organization. For employee relations, this is the relationship between the employer and the employees. The employer here is represented by the managers, and therefore we can comfortably say that employee relations is the relationship between managers and employees. It is expected that this relationship should be cordial in nature through the promotion of democratic principles. What are these democratic principles? 1, involvement. 2, consultation. And 3, communication. A good employee-employer relationship should be healthy. And a healthy relationship is where employees and employers are working together collaboratively to achieve organizational objectives. And therefore, when auditing employee relations, we are going to look at the quality of the relationship between employees and employers with regard to matters like 1, discipline, 2, communication, and 3, grievance and dispute handling. Going to our first theme is recruitment and onboarding. By definition, recruitment is a process of attracting potential and available candidates to join an organization. And that means it's attracting talent. When we attract talent, we want to solicit applications from those potential candidates to work for our organizations. And how do we attract, or what can attract people to an organization? One, brand name of an organization. Two, the jobs. Three, the compensation and rewards. And four, the work environment. So how then do we attract people? We attract them through advertisement. Depending on the sources of our candidates, we can attract candidates from within or outside the organization. And that is where we can place our advertisements. When auditing recruitment and selection, we look at the whole process of identifying vacant positions to the time an employee is placed on the job and onboarded. So we look at how we identify vacancies, how we communicate the vacant positions to the relevant people, approvals, advertisements, shortlisting, interviewing, selection, appointment, and then onboarding. And we will be looking at the fairness, transparency, and the legality of all those activities in this process. Onboarding, as I have indicated, is a process of introducing new employees to an organization. We introduce people before or during reporting. It is a good practice, as we shall see, to start onboarding before an employee visits the organization. Why? Because we prepare them for their starting of work early enough so that they do not face challenges learning many things at the same time. So this introduction ensures that, one, the employee is comfortable with the work environment. Two, the employee understands the policies and regulations governing the organization and behavior. Three, the employee understands the culture of the organization. So when you talk about onboarding as an integration process, it means that the employee seamlessly starts working and relating with others in a way that does not cause friction. So that is our definition of recruitment and onboarding, where we say that recruitment is attracting candidates to the organization, while onboarding is introducing the employees or integrating them to the organization. What is the purpose of recruiting and onboarding audit? Number one is to determine whether these two processes are compliant with the labor laws. I want to address myself briefly to the labor laws, especially on recruitment. There are quite a number of laws that regulate recruitment of employees. One is the Employment Act. Two is the Labor Institutions Act. And three is the People with the Disabilities Act of 2003. The Employment Act talks about several things, one of which is issuance of contracts. So in our audit, we will be looking at whether employees are issued with contracts, and these contracts must be written. Under the Employment Act, any employee engaged for 3 months and beyond should be given a written contract. So in auditing recruitment, we'll be looking at whether or not these employees have been given written contracts, because it is a compliance issue. The other aspect that is covered under the People with Disabilities Act is affirmative action, where organizations deliberately focus on hiring people with disabilities to occupy vacant positions. In the public sector, 5% of jobs should be reserved for people with disabilities. 5%. So when we are auditing our recruitment and selection, we will look at the number of people with disabilities who have been hired over the period of time, and whether we have complied with this requirement of people with disabilities occupying 5% of jobs. The Employment Act also talks about discrimination, and this is derived from our Constitution 2010, that everybody in this country has a right not to be discriminated against. Discrimination in terms of age, gender, religion, or even tribe. And that is a compliance issue related to recruitment and onboarding. Other requirements under the Employment Act relate to the employment of people who are underage. And underage people are those under the age of 13 years. And even if we employ these people, they should be given light work. It's not like a full day's employment. Light work can be 2 hours, 3 hours, or even 6 hours. And it should not be intensive. Why? Because we want to avoid child labor under the law. So anybody who employs a minor under the age of 13 is committing an offense. Another aspect, which is a compliance issue in recruitment, is work permits. This applies for both citizens and non-citizens. If a citizen of Kenya is going to a foreign country, they must have a work permit to work in the foreign country. And if foreigners are coming to Kenya, they should have a work permit in Kenya. Anybody who employs or recruits a person without a work permit is committing an offense. And lastly, a compliance issue on recruitment is privacy and data collection. Privacy and data collection. That under the Data Protection Act 2019, employees are data owners. Any data collected from them could be private and confidential. And therefore, as a compliance issue during recruitment, any private and confidential data collected should be protected from access by unauthorized persons. So as a purpose of recruitment and onboarding audit, we are looking at compliance with the various labor laws. And I have indicated some of the areas of compliance, such as age, 2, affirmative action, 3, contracts, 4, discrimination, 5, work permits, and 6, privacy and data collection. There are other legal requirements like recruitment fee under the Labor Institutions Act. No agency, and this agency is a recruitment agency, no recruitment agency should charge a recruitment fee, meaning that all recruitments must be free. So those are compliance issues, and this must be mapped against the relevant labor laws, including our constitutions. The laws that I have mentioned are around 4. 1, the Employment Act. 2, the Labor Institutions Act. 3, People with Disabilities Act. And 4 is the Constitution. Secondly, the purpose of recruitment and onboarding is to ensure that the practices, the policies, and the processes are fair, consistent, and non-discriminatory. Fairness implies giving everybody an equal opportunity to participate or to be hired. Meaning that in our policies on recruitment and onboarding, there should be fair chances given to all potential candidates. If employees perceive unfairness, they may sue the organization under the Employment Act or the Constitution, which gives people rights to be considered for employment. About consistency is that these practices must be applied across board or across functions. When we talk of consistency, we are looking at the recruitment and the selection criteria. The recruitment criteria relate to the job specifications and person specifications. And then the selection criteria relate to the performance and the merit of the candidates. These two must be applied consistently so that we do not have variations or disparities in the selection process. For that reason, we need to standardize our practices, particularly which practices. One, our standard operating procedures. When it comes to recruitment and selection, we must apply the standard procedures. Two, we must be consistent with the tools that we use for both recruitment and onboarding. If we use an interview, let us use interviews consistently. If it is observation, we use observations consistently. So that consistency ensures predictability and reliability. Lastly, the audit of recruitment and onboarding ensures that there is no discrimination. As I indicated, especially under the Employment Act, nobody should be discriminated against on account of age, gender, education, tribe, or religion whatsoever. This non-discrimination ensures that everybody has a chance of being hired and making a contribution to the organization. Another purpose of auditing, onboarding, and recruitment is to ensure efficiency. Efficiency has to do with two main things. One, time, and two, resources. When we talk about the efficiency of onboarding, we are looking at the time taken to onboard an employee. And two, the cost of onboarding and recruitment. In the next few minutes, we will be looking at the metrics or measurements of recruitment and onboarding, where we are talking about the time taken to hire a person. If it takes a long time against the industry standard, then that process is not efficient. Similarly, we audit onboarding on the basis of cost, especially financial cost. Money is spent communicating with the employees, money is spent interviewing them, and the money is spent integrating them into the organization through onboarding. So how much money is spent in onboarding and recruitment is the subject of a HR auditor or audit. The process will show whether it is successful or not. The other purpose is reduction of employee exits or turnover. That if recruitment and selection are done properly, then chances of employees remaining in the organization for a long time is high. How is this done? One, during recruitment, we attract people to the jobs and to the organization. If the jobs are attractive, then the employees are likely to stay for longer. If the organization is also attractive, by organization I mean three things. One, the environment, two, the pay, and three, the culture. If these things are right and attractive to the employee, they will remain in the organization. And lastly, onboarding. Onboarding creates an impression on the new employee about what the organization is about. It reflects the culture of the organization, particularly on the values of that organization. During onboarding, we introduce the employees to the values of the organization. What are the examples of these values that employees should know during onboarding? One, professionalism. Two, innovation. Three, recognition. Four, integrity. If these are values that employees see during onboarding, then they are likely to remain with that organization, because an organization that values innovation will reward innovation. An organization that values integrity will always tell the truth and will always be transparent. So these values will make an employee stay in the organization for a long time. And therefore, recruitment and onboarding audits help us to identify areas of weakness and improve them so that we can reduce turnover. Lastly, recruitment and onboarding audit is meant to align talent acquisition to corporate strategy. That when we acquire talent, they should be aligned with the strategies of an organization. For example, a strategy of an organization may be to introduce innovative ideas in product development. Or specifically, we can say, develop two new products in the next 1 year. So how does this relate to acquisition, which is recruitment? That during recruitment, we must focus on employees who are innovative so that we can achieve that strategy of two new products which are innovative. During onboarding, we should emphasize innovation, that anybody who innovates stands a chance of being rewarded and retained. And therefore, when we audit these two aspects, that is recruitment and onboarding, we align them with corporate strategy. What are the areas covered under recruitment and selection? That is the scope of recruitment and onboarding. What does it cover? Quite a number of things are covered here. One is the process of recruitment and the process of onboarding. The process of recruitment starts at the time a position falls vacant. So during audit, one should find out how vacancies are identified. And step two is requisitioning the vacant positions. Requisitioning means sending a request to the relevant authorities seeking permission to hire a new person to fill those vacancies that have been identified. So requisition is made to either the recruitment and selection, rather the HR department, or two in some organizations, the procurement department, so that we identify agencies that are likely to do this work for us. Or the two departments can work together, but usually the first point of call is the HR department. That is where we requisition vacant position. So the next step in this process is approval. Who approves the vacancies? Depending on the position, it can be approved by the senior management or the CEO, or if it is the senior manager's position that has fallen vacant, such as CEO, it should be approved by the board. In family-like organizations, the directors are the owners of the organization, and therefore the owners are the ones to approve. And then it goes to the next stage of advertising. Advertising the vacant jobs in relevant positions so that we can attract those candidates. So advertisements can be done within or outside the organization. The question that an auditor should ask, how effective is the recruitment channel, either within or outside? If it's a newspaper, how effective was it? If it is a notice board, how effective was it? If it is a word of mouth, how effective was it? And this can be established during interviews by asking the interviewees or candidates how they got to know about the job. Some may know through advertisements or through a friend or through the notice board. And that should be noted down so that next time when there is an interview, we can look at the channel that gave us the most candidates for selection. Then after advertising, employees will apply and the shortlisting starts. After shortlisting, we interview. After interviewing, we select. After selection, we appoint. And after appointment, onboarding begins. So it's a whole process which should be audited from identification of vacancies to the time the employee is onboarded. So we are looking at the efficiency and the effectiveness of all these stages. Up to the time we are onboarding, and after onboarding, we should also find out the quality of employees that were hired. And I will talk about this under the metrics for recruitment and onboarding. Secondly, recruitment and onboarding covers compliance. This is the level to which this process adheres to the labor laws, such as Employment Act, Labor Relations Act, and the Labor Institutions Act. Compliance, as we mentioned yesterday, is an important aspect. Why? Because we want to avoid risks associated with non-compliance. I can repeat the risks of non-compliance. 1, lawsuits. 2, fines. And 3, penalties. When we are auditing, we should focus on compliance with these laws so that we ensure that we do not risk the organization. And then equal opportunity is enshrined in the Employment Act and the Constitution 2010, where all Kenyans have an equal right to be hired. So that opportunity should be given to all the employees. So how do we ensure equal opportunity? 2 things. 1, we must have in place a policy on equal opportunity. A policy on equal opportunity. And secondly, we advertise positions in public where eligible employees can see them and apply so that everybody has an equal opportunity. If it is a vacant position within an organization, you can send an email to all employees or post this vacant position on the notice board so that everybody can see the vacancy and apply. That gives everybody an equal opportunity. And then another area covered is efficiency, which I've mentioned earlier. That is the time taken and the amount of money spent on recruitment and onboarding. And these are metrics that I will discuss in a short while. Candidate experience is another area covered under recruitment and selection audit. Today, organizations are not just selling products, they are selling experience. Experience relates to the perception of candidates or employees about the organization. We want our new employees to have a positive perception of our organization, that they should think positively about the organization and regard it as an organization they can work for. In many cases, we experience our environment using our 5 senses. For example, the sense of sight. When an employee is being onboarded or is being recruited, they see what is happening in the organization in terms of the physical and the social environment. Physical relates to the health and safety issues, and they can observe that. And social is the relationship. They can observe the relationship among the panelists or among employees during onboarding. That gives them an experience of what to expect through observation. And that is the sense of sight. They can also use the sense of hearing. Hearing stories about the organization, either the stories of success or the stories of failure. And that gives them an experience based on the sense of hearing. What do they hear people say about the organization? And usually we want them to hear good stories so that they can join the organization during recruitment, or they can start working during onboarding. And there are other senses that we use which appeal to us in this recruitment and onboarding process. So that experience where employees feel comfortable, employees feel wanted, employees feel they belong, employees identify with, is the experience that we want to audit during recruitment and onboarding. So what are the aspects that we can assess related to employee or candidate experience? 1, perception of fairness. 2, perception of transparency. And 3, perception of inclusivity. Earlier on, I talked about fairness, where employees must feel like they have been treated fairly, that there was no discrimination, and that they were given an equal opportunity. And if they failed, it should be because of their own weaknesses. Then transparency is giving everybody access to information, asked the same questions, and also everything is done above board. That there should be no discrimination in this process, and that everything should be done openly during the day. Openness. And then lastly is inclusivity. Today, organizations are focusing on inclusivity because of the need to obtain insights from everybody. That an inclusive environment is where employees participate in decision making, and that nobody is left behind. This involvement helps to create a positive image of the organization. How employees or a potential candidate feel like their opinions, their ideas, and their insights matter to the organization, especially when they see them being implemented. Another area covered in recruitment is resource utilization. particularly financial matters. And here we look at the utilization of the budget from the time a position is identified to be vacant to the time of onboarding. Usually in our budgeting as HR managers, we create a budget for recruitment and onboarding based on our human resource plan. In the human resource plan, we have projections or forecasts of the number of employees required in the future. For instance, if an organization is expanding, in the human resource plan, there should be a provision for hiring new employees to cater for the expansion. And therefore, a budget should be allocated. When we do audit the process, we look at how much was spent and how much is remaining from the budget set, so that we are seen to be efficient in the utilization of these financial resources. Where is very high, the auditors can make a recommendation of one, automating the recruitment and onboarding so that we reduce on that budget. Two, reducing the steps involved in recruitment and selection. And lastly, hiring experienced people from within so that we reduce this cost. So resource utilization, particularly budget, could be the focus of HR auditors in recruitment and onboarding. Lastly is data integrity, that the data we collect about the jobs and about the candidates should be accurate. Starting with data related to the jobs, we may do a job analysis. Why do a job analysis? Is to develop three things. One, job descriptions. Two, job specifications. And three, person specifications. So job analysis is a process of collecting data about the job. And then there is data about the employee. And this data is captured in two documents upon application. One is the letter of application, and two is the resume or the CV. Quite a lot of data is captured. So as HR auditors, we should validate the data collected related to the job and the candidate. And we can establish the accuracy of the data. For example, if a person presents certificates from a college or a university, we can do a verification check by contacting the college or university to verify whether the candidate was actually a student in that institution. And that helps us to ensure accuracy of data that has been presented to us by the new employees. And then during onboarding, there is data that is collected, data related to one, quality of the candidate, two, satisfaction of the process of onboarding, and three, the cost associated with onboarding. And talking of data integrity is the validity and reliability of that data. Validity has to do with accuracy, and reliability has to do with consistency. That at no time should we change this data to suit certain individual interests. That will compromise the integrity of that data and therefore defeats the purpose of auditing. Before we take a short break for questions and comments, let us look at the key elements of recruitment audit. Starting with job descriptions, this is a statement of the duties and the responsibilities of the job holder. Duties and responsibilities of the job holder. Some of the elements that should be the focus of the audit is clarity, accuracy, and relevance. Clarity refers to the language that is used in the job descriptions. And the auditor should assess whether this language is simple and clear for understanding. So do understand their job descriptions. If not, then chances are that employees will not perform their work effectively. In relation to recruitment audit, if the job descriptions are not clear, two things can happen. One, the job descriptions can discourage potential candidates and therefore cannot attract the right candidates to work for us if they are not clear. Two, it can encourage people, even those who don't qualify, to apply. And that creates a burden on the recruiters, especially when you are doing shortlisting, because you will have thousands of people applying because they thought they qualify for the position. Accuracy means that the data or the information contained in the job descriptions can be verified and reflect realities on the ground. Emphasis on realities on the ground. Why? Because when we start onboarding the employees, they may find that what was on the advertisement is different from what they have been introduced to. And that can create disillusionment among the new candidates. So accuracy is key when it comes to job descriptions because we use them to advertise and also onboard new employees. And then lastly is job relevance. The jobs are relevant in two ways. One, they help the employee to perform jobs based on their qualifications. So the job must be relevant to the qualifications of the person being hired. And the two, relevance means that it helps to achieve an objective or satisfy a need. Job descriptions must satisfy the needs of the organization, that is, producing results that help the organization to achieve its objectives. If the job description is irrelevant, therefore it cannot attract candidates and cannot help the organization to achieve its objectives. So as to ensure relevance, we need to do job analysis where we collect information about all jobs, analyze the information so that we can identify relevance. Secondly, another element is selection methods. There are methods of selecting employees, and this relates to how we can identify the most qualified candidates. The first method of selection could be an interview, either a written interview or an oral interview. Another method could be performance demonstration, that a new or a prospective employee is given a task to perform so that we can identify their skills, knowledge, and abilities. Another selection method is the use of job centers, where we are hiring a large number of employees at the same time. So we put them in groups and assess several things about them. One, communication skills in the group. Two, leadership skills in the group. Three, their performance or contribution in the group. And four, their levels of cooperation in the group. This helps us to determine whether that candidate is eligible for selection. So what should be the auditors be looking for in the selection methods? One is fairness. Are the interviews, are the performance demonstrations, or are the job centers fair? Do they give equal chances to everybody? Are there people who are disadvantaged by using these methods? That will determine fairness. And then reliability. For example, an interview. We assess reliability in the sense that they are able to produce consistent results at the end of the process. And how do we ensure reliability in interviews? Is to ask the same questions to all the candidates so that we gauge whether the selected candidate actually emerged the best because we use the same tool. And then lastly, on selection method is validity, accuracy. How accurate was the selection method, whether it's an interview, a performance demonstration, or a job center. At the end of the audit process in recruitment and selection, there is what they call validity, the predictive validity of the selection criteria. Predictive validity of the selection criteria, meaning that the methods that we use should give us the right candidate, and that will test its validity, accuracy in giving us the best candidate. So interviews should lead to the right candidate. Performance demonstration should lead to the right candidate. And that is why we assess the effectiveness of onboarding as well as orientation, so that we determine whether the methods that we used helped us to get the right candidate. Another key element is the recruiter practices. These are the norms in recruitment and selection. As I indicated earlier, yes, then. Welcome back. Recruiter practices is another area of focus during recruitment and onboarding audit. And this relates to the norms that are used in this process. It is expected that the recruiters, and recruiters here we mean the HR managers and his or her team, should ensure that the practices that they use in this whole process are fair, are reliable, and are valid. Therefore, from a professional point of view, recruiters must demonstrate professionalism. As HR managers, we are guided by the code of conduct as stipulated in the IHRM code of conduct. That a professional is somebody who is qualified and merits to perform the work of a HR manager. So some of the elements of professionalism is fairness, is integrity, is confidentiality, among others. There should be no discrimination, and that the employees are treated in a way that respects their own personal integrity. And therefore, what should be the focus of audit is the qualifications of the recruiters. Shortly, I will be talking about the best practices in recruitment and onboarding, one of which is to train recruiters so that they can demonstrate professionalism, ethics, and objectivity. So we audit professionalism, ethics, and objectivity in this process. The other element is the adoption of new technologies in the recruitment and the onboarding process. An example is ATS, which means automated tracking system, and 2, human resource information system. These two can work together by way of integration. Why do we talk about technology? 3 things. 1, it ensures accuracy of recruitment and onboarding. 2, it ensures consistency in recruitment. And 3, it helps to reduce cost of recruitment and onboarding. I can take the example of onboarding, where we send materials to the selected candidates or employees. These materials can be voluminous. For example, policies, manuals, SOPs, among others. This can be time-consuming and expensive. But by using automated systems, we can send them in soft copies. And we can summarize them in short forms so that it makes it easier for the employees to understand the onboarding process. On recruitment, we can track the applications of employees using ATS. We can also shortlist candidates using ATS. Of course, we can integrate that with AI. So in modern times, we talk about the adoption of technologies in recruitment and onboarding because it helps us to achieve consistency, accuracy, and cost effectiveness. The other element is onboarding materials, that during onboarding, we give the new recruits materials for their reading so that they can have a clear understanding of the organization. These materials include HR policies, standard operating procedures, and codes of conduct. So we want to find out how comprehensive these resources are. If they are sketchy, then the new recruit may not fully understand what is expected of them. Or two, the new recruit might start forming an opinion about the transparency of the new recruits. So those materials must not only be comprehensive, they must be adequate and must also be clear enough for understanding. Then lastly is compliance checks that we need to check recruitment and onboarding for compliance. Yesterday, we talked about legal and regulatory compliance, where we are talking about our processes, practices, and systems which adhere to the legal standards. And the legal standards or frameworks are the laws and the regulations governing the human resource functions. And as I have made my introduction, there are quite a number of laws that govern recruitment and selection. For the benefit of those that have just joined us, I can mention a few of them. One is the Employment Act. Two is the Labor Institutions Act. Three is the People with Disabilities Act. And four is Data Protection Act. So when checking on compliance, we are mapping our recruitment and onboarding practices against those legal standards so that we avoid lawsuits, we avoid penalties, and we avoid fines should the employee or the candidate go to court. So compliance is important, and if I may repeat, there are several types of HR audits that we conduct. One is functional audit, which we are looking at today. Two, compliance audit, where we are looking at the legal standards. Three, strategic audit, where we are aligning our HR practices and functions with the corporate strategy. And lastly, cultural audit, where we are looking at the values, the norms, and the beliefs of an organization in relation to recruitment, training, performance management, and others. So on compliance audit, we can integrate it with functional audit. That's why I've mentioned compliance checks with the purpose of ensuring that recruitment and onboarding adhere to the law as provided in the acts. We want now to move to the metrics to review or audit in recruitment and onboarding. These are measurements. These are indicators of either success or failure in recruitment and onboarding. And we can categorize them into 5. One is the efficiency metrics, which relate to time, money. And as you can see, time to fill vacant positions And where do we start counting the time? Is from the time of requisitioning to the time of onboarding. How much time does it take? In the era of technology like today, the best practice is that it should take approximately 60 days to fill a vacant position. In private sector organizations, they even take much less, like 45 days. Somebody can ask, why should it take 45 days and yet we can advertise positions in real time? Yes, it is possible to advertise, but again, we should give enough time for all the potential candidates to apply. Why? Because not all of us are online all the time. So some of the advertisements might pass by if we are not online. Probably some of us take 1 or 2 days before they check their emails, and others take much longer. So for purposes of giving potential candidates adequate time to apply, the standard time could be 45 days to 60 days. In the public sector, it's a different ball game because of the bureaucratic nature of the system. For instance, one of the requirements of public procurement is that there should be 21 days notice, 21 days. And then after 21 days, we give people an opportunity to apply. And application can take 15 to 30 days. And then after application comes the shortlisting, which can take a relatively longer time. And by the time people are being interviewed and onboarded, it has taken 3 months. And for some positions, it takes up to 6 months. That's a very long time to fill a vacant position. Why? Because one, the applicants might have given up because they did not receive a response. Or two, those prospective top talents may have joined other organizations if the time to fill the vacant positions is long. I'm trying to imagine public sector organizations taking 3 months to fill vacant positions when an employee needs a job like yesterday. So any job that comes around, they will have left, and that is a loss to that public sector organization. So we look at the time taken to fill the vacant positions. Two, the time to productivity. After onboarding, the employee should take a short time to reach the standards expected in terms of performance. And this will depend on a number of factors. One, the support given by the organization. Two, the nature of job being performed. And three, the qualifications or the quality of the employee hired. Speaking of quality of employee hired, we will talk about that in a short while, that if the employee was not qualified or rehearsed the answers during interviews, when it comes to performance, they may take longer. And therefore, the time to productivity is long. Speaking of support, new employees should be supported by all means. How? one, partnering them with qualified or more experienced employees. And that is what you call a buddy system through mentorship and coaching. Two, giving that employee adequate resources to perform, such as computers and even money. Three, support in terms of check-ins. New employees should be checked to ensure that they are doing the right things. They should not be left on their own for longer periods of time. Otherwise, the time to productivity will be longer. And then lastly is the cost per hire. How much did it take to hire one position? This means that you calculate the total cost of all hires. You divide that by the number of vacant positions that were advertised. That will give you an average cost per hire. The total cost over the number of positions filled, that will give you a cost per hire. And this will reflect on your budget, because if the cost of hiring is high, then you are likely to burst your budget very soon. And when new employees are required, there will be no money to spend. Another measurement is the quality metric or metrics. And here we are talking about quality of hires. How do we know about the quality of hire? Or how do we tell that the person hired is of high quality? Several indicators. One, they are performing their work to expected standards, that is performance. Two, they are relating well with others, that is teamwork. Three, they are cooperating with others. And four, they are supporting others as well where need arises. So that is the quality of hire. So how do we know that the person we hired is of high quality? We can conduct a survey on the existing employees about the new hires. So this can be a tool like an interview or a questionnaire asking the existing employees to rate the new hires. So that rating will tell us whether the person who was hired is of high quality. Secondly, another quality aspect is the level of satisfaction. Depending on your organization, you can conduct satisfaction with the recruitment and selection process, particularly manager satisfaction. Are the managers happy with the person or with the process that was used? Satisfaction can be high or low depending on the quality of the hires and their performance. And lastly, a quality aspect is the individual performance of the new hires, that they are able to do the work for which they were hired. If it is targets, they are meeting the targets. If it is time, they are performing within the timelines. If it's objectives, they are achieving the objectives. That is an indication of a high-performing new employee. And then another metric is retention. It is expected that when we recruit and onboard, the employees will remain in the organization for a long period of time. So we look at the quality of our hiring process with respect to employee turnover. That if the recruitment and onboarding were not done right, employees might leave soon after. For instance, you have hired a new recruit to work in a transport company. And the transport here, we mean road transport or air transport. Assuming we take the road transport. During recruitment and onboarding, the managers promise that they will support the new employee by all means, including internet. And then during placement on the job, the employee asks whether there is internet in the lorry they are driving to deliver goods to the customers. And then it turns out that there is no internet in the lorries. They will be disappointed. And especially for young people like Gen Zs, they will leave. They will exit. Why are they exiting? Because what is the reality on the ground is different from the promises they got during recruitment and onboarding. And therefore, we should look at whether there is a connection between recruitment, onboarding, and turnover. Because employee turnover can be determined by asking the reasons why they are leaving. And somebody can say, I was promised internet, but I didn't find the internet. That is a problem with onboarding and recruitment. Another measurement is diversity metrics, where we are looking at gender balance, age, disability, and minority groups. Gender balance requires that 2/3 of the employment or employees should be given to either male or female employees. Age, we are talking about different age groups or sets. Young people, middle-aged people, and older people. There should be a balance. That when we are hiring and onboarding, we should ensure that all ages are represented so that we don't have only older people joining the organization or only very young people. There should be a balance because each age group brings to the table different experiences, different insights. And then disability, under the People with Disabilities Act, 5% of the jobs should be reserved for them. So again, we look at how many people have we hired that have disabilities. And then minority groups, and this is where we can do mainstreaming as well, or even affirmative action. That for minority groups to get an opportunity to work, then we should ensure that our advertisements in recruitment go to the lowest level, including villages where minority groups can be found. In Kenya, we have a number of minority groups, such as Ogiek and Njems. And there are other small groups in South Coast, in Cliffy. These people should also be given opportunities. In many cases, public sector organizations ensure that the information about is cascaded to the village elder level so that the information gets to the people who are eligible and cannot be accessing mainstream advertisements during recruitment. So we audit gender, age, disability, and minority group balances. And then lastly, success metrics, how successful this has been. And one of the key metric to show success is the completion rate. That sometimes we recruit people and only one person applies. That means that there is a problem with our recruitment, particularly our advertisement. Or two, we get candidates, interview them, but it takes a long time for them to get feedback. And by the time you are giving them feedback, they tell you that they are already engaged elsewhere. And then comes to onboarding. Some people start getting onboarded before they join. And when it comes to the time of joining, as shown in the dates on the appointment letter, they don't report. And yet some materials have been sent to them. Or sometimes they report. And after assessing the environment during onboarding, they walk away saying that they did not expect what they are seeing. So again, that becomes an onboarding issue. Another success factor, you look at training effectiveness, and again, feedback from candidates about their experience related to the whole process. What are the challenges that relate to recruitment and onboarding? We all face challenges in performance of all the functions, be it recruitment, be it training, be it performance management, compensation, employee relations, or even health and safety. Challenges are everywhere, and therefore we should expect to face some of these challenges. Some of their challenges in auditing onboarding include bias, where we are using our own personal judgments or experiences to assess onboarding. And therefore, we end up having a subjective decision when we are writing our reports. In some cases, the recruiters have their own preferences. They want somebody they like to join the organization, either because they are related or they know them. That is corruption. And the process continues even during onboarding. I've had people say that they face challenges when they join organizations, that nobody is there to show them what is going on or what should be done. So they knock at offices and they are told, sio hapa, enda kwa hii office ingine. Going to the next office, they are told, no, you are in the wrong office. Go back to the reception. That creates a bad impression of the organization, showing the level of unpreparedness and the disorganization during onboarding. And the candidates can assess the organization negatively if this is not done well. And others can be very negative, For example, if a new candidate is stuck with some task or job, they ask their colleagues, and the answer is, mimi sikukuleta hapa. That's a very negative statement which can discourage new employees. And that is why we need to educate our employees on how we can receive new candidates and also assist them to perform their work. Another challenge is gaps in our documents, that when we audit recruitment, maybe there are records that are missing, such as approvals or advertisements or letters of appointment missing from our system. That becomes a challenge because we do not have a whole picture of what happened. But again, that becomes an audit query. The quality of onboarding, where there is insufficient training as well as weak induction. Insufficient training is where employees are taken through the process very quickly, and they know very little at the end of this process. Or a weak induction, where people are inducted by junior staff or hand over to the relevant department or section is not done right. That is weak. This can affect the level of integration of the new employee to the organization. Another challenge is the turnover rate. Early resignations, where employees are leaving early soon after onboarding. That again shows that there are weaknesses in our recruitment and selection. Misaligned policies is another challenge, where recruitment and onboarding process does not follow the procedures as stipulated in the policy. And that can become a hindrance in recruitment and onboarding. Lastly is candidate feedback, that soon after onboarding, it's advisable and it's a good practice to get feedback from the employees. This feedback can be in the form of, one, an interview with the new recruit, or two, a template which can be filled by the new recruits, assessing various aspects of the recruitment and onboarding process. If this is well structured, then success rates are very high. But if they are not structured in terms of time and the tools to be used, then we may never get an opportunity to know areas of improvement. What is the strategic value of recruitment and onboarding audit? Quite a number of them that we are going to derive. One, improved hiring quality, especially when it comes to talent management. We acquire, utilize, and retain talent through recruitment and onboarding. And from a strategic point of view, if we can retain, or for us to retain those high quality employees, then the quality of hiring and onboarding should also be high, so that the right candidates or employees join our organizations. Secondly, compliance, that if we do the recruitment and the onboarding in the right way, we are protected against risks associated with non-compliance. talent branding, that we get to improve our brand image, that the organization is a partner, or the organization is a good place to work or an employer to work for. If this recruitment and onboarding are done well, where there is transparency and accountability, then we are likely to create a positive image of the organization. And we are likely to attract top talent from the market. On retention, if we do recruitment and onboarding in the right way, in a structured manner, in a transparent way, we are likely to reduce employee turnover. So the levels of attrition will reduce, and that will workforce stability. Stability because there is continuity of service delivery, and stability that there is no money that is spent on hiring new employees. Process efficiency, it lowers cost and boosts productivity, as I've indicated earlier. And lastly, auditing recruitment and onboarding provides us with data on the basis of which we can make informed decisions. You can be sure of getting more details about this aspect of audit if you can join us from the 20th of this month to 25th in Nairobi at the Safari Club, where these details will be covered. You are all welcome to this training, and the training will be certified human resource auditor starting on 20th to 25th of October 2025. You are all welcome, and we look forward to seeing you there so that we can discuss these aspects in detail, and it will be beneficial to all of us. What are the best practices? I promise that I will be looking at the best practices in this process. One is have regular reviews. This is not a one-off thing. As I indicated earlier, that auditing is a continuous process. We can do this during the annual audits or at a time that we have scheduled, particularly for HR audit. So those regular reviews helps to ensure consistency, helps to identify deviations, and also helps to take corrective actions in time. Another best practice is training of recruiters, that recruiters may not have the relevant skills in interviewing or assessing candidates or even onboarding. So we train them so that they can acquire skills on how to interview, because sometimes we are biased during interviews. One of the biases is the first impression, that what we see in a new candidate will be used to validate the rest of the process, and that is bias. But when we train our employees so that we don't judge a book by its cover, we ensure that we recruit a person based on their contribution to the organization and not on their looks. Because a book can look very bad from the outside, and yet inside it contains gold. We also need to map the journey of the candidate throughout the process by identifying those weak points in the hiring and onboarding process. And this can only be done if there are regular reviews so that we can identify those weak points in time. Because recruitment and onboarding is a continuous thing for as long as employees exit the organization or are promoted, then every recruitment and onboarding process is an opportunity to identify weak points so that we know that we are on the right track and things are progressing well. Leveraging technology, especially digital systems, is important, where we are using ATS, for example, to track applications, or using dashboards within our human resource information systems so that people can questions directly. And then there is the other best practice, which is feedback. Employees should be given feedback during recruitment and after recruitment, as well as during onboarding and after onboarding. This feedback helps them to understand where they have done well and in areas that they need improvement. There is always a shortcut that some employers take when it comes to providing feedback during recruitment. And this is the statement they put in the advertisement. I quote, "If you do not hear from us within 2 weeks, please consider yourself as unsuccessful," end of quote. Though it's a way of cost cutting in terms of time and money, but that can reflect negatively on the organization because the employees may not know why they were not successful. In the era of AI, should be able to sift through applications and give feedback to the applicants immediately the process is complete. AI is able to pick out candidates who are not qualified and the reasons why they did not qualify. And a response can be sent to them indicating why they did not qualify. And even after the interviews, the final selection, again using AI or other technologies, you can inform the candidates that were interviewed why they did not qualify so that they are able to improve on areas they were weak at or weak in. This is also a responsibility that we have as recruiters so that we can enable those unsuccessful candidates to better themselves in any subsequent applications. Otherwise, if we don't give them feedback, it reflects negatively on us as recruiters. And then lastly, there should be an integration between recruitment, onboarding, as well as performance and career development. That when we recruit, we look for people with potential. And therefore, immediately after hiring, we can link their potential with the career. And we can also link their potential with performance. During onboarding, we can also identify other skills which we may not have identified during interviews. And again, this additional information can help to determine the performance levels of the new hires as well as their career prospects. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the best practices in recruitment and onboarding. We go to the second part of our presentation, this morning. Remember, we said that this is a three-part presentation, starting with recruitment and onboarding. Secondly is performance and compensation. And the third is benefits and employee relations. So the second part is performance and compensation. When we audit performance, we are assessing effectiveness, fairness, and the consistency of performance management systems. Effectiveness has to do with the outcomes, outputs, or results. Fairness has to do with equitability of the methods used. And the three, consistency has to do with the predictability of our performance management system. On compensation audit, we are looking at the payment given to employees for working and other incentives. In particular, we are looking at pay structures, incentives, and benefits. For purposes of this presentation, I will focus on pay systems, pay structures, and pay grades, which will be the subject of our audit. And then for benefits, I will push that to the third part of our presentation, that is benefits and employee relations. So what do we assess or evaluate in relation to pay structures and grades? 1, fairness. 2, equity. 3, competitiveness. And lastly, compliance with the labor laws. I want to talk about the last two aspects on compensation audit, that is competitiveness and compliance. A compensation system is said to be competitive if it is better or the best compared to other organizations in the same industry. Better or the best comparatively. And there are three levels of market rates in terms of compensation. 1, above market rate. 2, average. And 3, below market rate. Above market rate means that the organization is paying their employees more than what the competitors are paying. For example, if the average market pay is 50,000 for a secretary, then you can be above that market rate by paying 70,000. However, that does not mean that those who are paying below market rate are not competitive. They can be competitive. How? Because we may have people who are earning like 40,000 shillings, but they have other benefits like comprehensive medical cover, bonuses, and other incentives, which when put together are above market rates. And that means that even if the payment itself is below market rates, the benefits are more than what the competitors are offering. And that can become competitive as well. But our desire is that when we are above market rate, it means that our payment is above average, and 2, our incentives are above average. That's the only way we can attract and retain top talent. On compliance, there are several issues associated with compliance. 1 is the minimum pay. Minimum pay relates to the requirement under the Employment Act that our compensation should not come below the minimum rate. And that is a compliance issue. There is no maximum in terms of compliance, but what is important is the minimum rate. And then another aspect of compliance is the payment of the agreed amount. That if in the contract an employee is paid 100,000, there should be no variation of that pay during the period they are working in the organization. If the pay comes down, then it must be in agreement with the employee. Otherwise, the employee can take the organization to court for either discrimination or breach of contract. The Employment Act says that an employee's pay should not be reduced to his or her disadvantage. So variation of payment is protected under the Employment Act, and that is a compliance issue. I want us to go specifically to performance audit and see what exactly are we going to audit. The key areas of audit include goal setting, that as a best practice, we should set goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. That without setting of goals and targets, we have no basis of evaluating performance because it's against the goals that we measure performance. Secondly, regularity and fairness of the process. How regular it is depends on your policy. Every organization has a policy on performance management, and it sets out the time periods within which this can be done. Others perform performance appraisals quarterly, others half yearly, others annually, depending on what works for them. So regularity is based on your policy. If you can do it quarterly, the better, because there are certain disadvantages associated with taking a long time to evaluate employees. On quality and consistency, we are talking about the quality of the evaluation. That it is one thing for a person to evaluate themselves and present their assessment, and it's also another to discuss the ratings with the supervisors and managers. One, to identify areas of success. Two, identify areas of weakness. And three, agree on the way forward. That is said to be quality performance evaluations. Then consistency is related to the application of the assessment criteria, as well as feedback. As a good practice, feedback should be given to the employees immediately after the performance evaluations, so that they know how they performed, they know their weak areas, and also they know what are the next steps. Then another area of audit is the linkage between performance gaps and training. When you talk of training, there's an element of training needs A training need is a performance gap that the employee does not perform to the expected standards. So how do we establish performance gaps? It's through performance evaluations or performance appraisals. And after those appraisals, we identify those performance gaps. And based on those gaps, we can identify training needs to bridge those gaps. So we initiate training which are geared toward bridging those performance gaps. For instance, after evaluating an employee in terms of their performance, we may discover that they are not good communicators, meaning that customers are complaining because the employee does not communicate well. Then in terms of training, because of that communication gap, we train the employee on communication so that they acquire skills and knowledge on communication to customers. So that is the linkage between performance and training. So when we audit performance, we will be looking at whether performance gaps are used to develop training programs. And lastly, an element that is audited is monitoring and evaluation. Do we monitor performance on a regular basis? What we are doing, that is the current status, whether we are achieving our objectives, the gaps that we may be having, and what are the next steps in our performance management system. So we audit all this, among others. The key elements of performance audit, we look at KPIs. Are KPIs set? Key performance indicators. For instance, a salesperson may have the following key performance indicators. 1, revenue collected in 1 month. 2, the number of new customers recruited. And 3, the level of customer satisfaction. Those are key performance indicators for a salesperson. For a human resource manager, the key indicator could be 1, the number of grievances and complaints addressed or resolved effectively. 2, it could be the completion rate of training programs, or it could be the level of satisfaction with compensation and benefits. Those are KPIs. So in performance audit, we look at whether there are KPIs set for all the employees and for all the departments, which must be aligned with the corporate objectives. Secondly is the evaluation methods. There are various methods of evaluation, such as self-evaluation, peer evaluation, downward evaluation, and upward evaluation. So in all these methods, we examine the formats of evaluation. For example, if it is a standard template. 2, feedback. What methods are we using to give feedback to employees? Is it oral feedback? Is it emails, or is it computer-based tools such as performance management systems? And then performance scoring. How do we score various elements related to KPIs? And then we also audit managerial training. That is whether or not the managers are well trained to conduct fair and transparent appraisals. People complain, especially against their managers, because they feel like the managers are not being fair or are biased or are targeting them so that they can be dismissed. Appraisal should not be used as a tool to punish anybody, but as a process of improving performance. And that is where managerial training is key, so that they can abstain from using these appraisals as a revenge mission. Another element is feedback systems. I've mentioned something about it, is the effectiveness of the feedback system. A feedback is effective if it has the following characteristics. One, it is timely. Two, it is relevant. And three, it is accurate. If it is none of this, then the performance feedback is not useful at all. Another element of audit is career development. And this is the question we ask. Is career development based on employee performance? We want to develop people's careers based on their performance. If a person is performing poorly in an area, then probably that is not their career. And we may need to redeploy them to another section or job so that we can also gauge their strengths elsewhere. The other element is record management, where we keep accurate records of all the employees related to their performance. And this will help us, especially when we have to put somebody on a PIP, that is Performance Improvement Plan. This documentation will help us to show the employee that there are weaknesses and that they need to improve. Or when it comes to a court case, suppose the employee contests the ratings of his or her performance, we are well covered because we have evidence to show that the employee is a perennial poor performer. What are the metrics for auditing performance? One is the percentage of employees with the clear performance goals. And we can do this by interviewing employees or giving them a questionnaire to fill and find out how many of them have their performance goals clearly defined. Secondly is the rate of goal attainment. How many employees are achieving their goals within a given period. If it is quarterly, how many are achieving? If the rate is very low, then we are not doing well. The other metric is frequency of appraisal. And again, I said this should be based on policy. If it is quarterly, let it be quarterly. Biannually, let it be so. There should be no change unless there is a need to change that policy. Another metric or measurement is level of satisfaction. particularly with the fairness of the appraisal methods and ratings. The ratings should be fair. If we say that a person has attained their targets, we can either rate them as meeting or exceeding expectations, 2, meeting expectations, or 3, below expectations. And we must clearly say what above expectation means or exceeding expectation. There must be clarity on that. So what does above or exceed expectation mean? Is it above 90? So what happens if somebody gets 98? What happens if somebody gets 95? Which criteria are we going to use to rate a person at 95 and not 98 or 100? So the scores must be very clear. And then another metric is the number or percentage of training programs based on appraisal outcomes, which I've discussed a little while ago. And then lastly is the turnover and retention rates, which are linked to performance. What can cause an employee leave an organization based on performance? One is the fairness of performance appraisals. 2 is the use of performance appraisal results. And 3 is the level of involvement with performance appraisal systems. If employees are not involved, if the criteria for evaluation is biased, then employees may have to leave, and that becomes a problem. What are the challenges of performance audit? Quite a number of them. I will discuss them briefly. One is biases. This is using personal judgment based on experience or observations to rate an employee. And this relates to some of the errors that we perform or commit during appraisal. One is the recency error, where we rate employees based on what they did in the recent past. We can't remember what happened in the deep past. 2, it could be a pitchfork effect, where ratings are based on very high standards, pitchfork, like a fork, that employees are not able to attain, very strict. And that's what you call the strict rater effect. And then another bias is the loose rater effect, where all employees are rated as average, irrespective of their actual performance. And this reduces fairness and accuracy if the ratings are subjective. Secondly is inconsistent standards, that when we use an evaluation criteria, we should apply it to everybody in a department. But if we vary the criteria, then we again become biased and become unfair. Transparency is another challenge, where there are unclear ratings or how they are determined. Somebody sits in an office and rates a person as either average or above average without explaining to the employees how they arrived at that rating. There must be a clear and transparent rating method of all employees. Another challenge is follow-up, that where there are areas of improvement, managers do not follow up, meaning that employees can continue performing poorly without the managers knowing. So as a best practice, we should make sure that we follow up on those recommendations, especially after an appraisal. Another challenge is compliance risk, where documents are not kept properly or they are incomplete, or in some cases, data on performance of individuals is shared with other employees without permission. This can discourage employees and can also lead to lawsuits. The other challenge is low engagement, where employees perceive unfairness and therefore they do not commit themselves to performing their work or supporting other employees. So ladies and gentlemen, those are the challenges when it comes to audit. What are the best practices in performance audits? One is ensuring that there is a standard evaluation criteria as well as tools in all departments. That is why we need to have meetings to agree on those standards so that everybody feels fairly rated and that there is transparency. 360-degree appraisal is one of the best practices that we get information or data from a variety of sources. So we can combine peer appraisal with downward appraisal, which is management appraisal, or we can combine peer appraisal, self-appraisal, and downward appraisal so that we are not biased. If all these people say that an employee is not a good performer, then there's no way they can be wrong, unlike when we use one method only, such as self-appraisal. We are all biased in self-appraisal and therefore may not give accurate ratings of ourselves. Another best practice is to ensure that the goals are SMART. They are specific, relating to a particular aspect of performance. They are measurable, that we can use metrics to determine or establish performance. They are achievable because the resources and time allow. They are relevant, meaning that they help to achieve a purpose. And all these are done within a particular time bound. So we set our targets, for example, our target for the next quarter from October to December. So we have a time that by end of December, we should be rating our employees. Timelines. Then continuous feedback. I would love a situation where employees are rated or even evaluated daily. But because it might become some cumbersome or in some cases lead to fatigue, we can do it quarterly or biannually. Again, the adoption of digital tools is advisable as a best practice to ensure accuracy, to ensure consistency, and also to avoid bias. Lastly, we must ensure that our managers are accountable for this performance management system so that everybody knows that if they don't do their work, there are repercussions. However, we should ensure that this is done fairly and in a timely manner. The second aspect in this topic, because the subheading was performance and compensation audit. So in compensation, we are looking at all forms of pay. And I mentioned the two forms. One, base pay, what employees are paid consistently for a whole month, for a whole year, and then variable pay. This is payment that changes over time. What is the scope of compensation audit? One is the pay structure, and we may have different structures in terms of pay. It might be a graded pay structure, which is the most common, or a family-based structure where similar jobs are grouped together and paid, or any other form or structure of compensation. What do we assess in the structure? Fairness. People should be paid fairly for a fair day's work, meaning that compensation should be commensurate with the jobs performed. Competitiveness, that when you compare what employees are paid in this organization and the other, there are no many differences. And lastly, consistency of pay systems, that there should be no variations. Otherwise, it will be unfair payment and employees will go to court. Secondly, we assess pay policies in terms of clarity. Is the pay policy clear on who should be paid what, where, and when? Accessibility, are the policies accessible to employees? You can make them accessible by posting them on your website or sending them to the employee's email, or using a dashboard which is used internally so that employees can access them. And then on policies, again, we assess transparency. Transparency can be ensured through participation in this process, and also benchmarking, so that people know that what they are paid is not any different from what other organizations are paying. Another area of assessment or audit is compliance, is compensation complying with the wage laws, particularly the minimum pay, equal pay regulations, that people should be paid based on equal amount of work done, and lastly, the contract, whether it's permanent, fixed term, or short term. They should be paid according to their contract. And then internal equity, this ensures fairness across all levels and roles, that an employee should be paid fairly when they compare themselves with other people in the same grade. The variation should not be so high that employees may become discontented. Then there is budget alignment. As I mentioned earlier, we all make budgets for compensation, for training, for performance, and other aspects. So there's a budget allocated for compensation, which is the biggest, I believe. And therefore, compensation should be sustainable. Otherwise, there will be an organizational collapse if a lot of its revenues is used to compensate people. Then lastly, compensation, documentation of compensation. The records must be accurate and must be complete. What are the elements of compensation audit? 1, salary grades, 2, bands, and 3, structures. I've talked about structures and bare fairness. Let me talk about job grades. In many organizations, job grades start from the lowest to the highest. For example, job grade D as the lowest, and the job grade T as the highest. So the higher the grade, the more they pay. And within each grade, there are bands. And these bands can be equated to notches. That job grade A has a band. That means the entry point and the highest level. Within each band, there is a notch. This notch takes care of the annual increments of employee salaries. So at the entry level, somebody might be earning 15,000. Next year might be earning 17 because there's an increment up to the highest level. So the notches must be adequate so that people don't climb up within the band very quickly, and then it becomes difficult for them to move to the next level. Another element of audit is incentives in terms of bonuses and allowances. How fair are they? How transparent do we allocate this? Equity, I've talked about it. Gender, in some organizations, women are paid lowly for some reason. Seniority, senior people should be paid well, even if they are occupying lower positions. And that is why we have salary differentials or overlaps. In an overlap, a junior person can earn more because he or she is senior in terms of experience. So seniority not only touches on the position, but also touches on experience. And again, benchmarking, we should compare ourselves with others in the market so that we can establish whether we are competitive. Lastly is the accuracy of the payroll. As I indicated, accuracy can only be determined if we keep records. What are the metrics or measurements of compensation audit? One is the fairness in payment, that is pay equity. Two, market competitiveness, either above average or below market rate. Three, compensation to revenue ratio, that how much are we compensating people? How much are we generating as revenue? We should be able to live within our means. If compensation is more than revenue, then we are working on losses. How about distribution of incentives? We should ensure that if it is bonuses and allowances that are given, they should be given fairly. There should be fairness. And lastly is the error rate in our payrolls. How many errors do we make when it comes to compensation, particularly when we are calculating the monthly pay as well as the variable pay, like bonuses and overtime. To avoid these errors, we should automate our system so that if there is an error, for example, in overtime calculations, the system can flag it out and direct you to where you should correct. For instance, if an organization pays overtime of 10 hours per month, 10 hours per month, there should be no 11 hours. The system should pick it out. Otherwise, if it doesn't, it can be a payroll error in payment. Challenges of compensation audit, there are quite a number. Pay disparities, these are differences in payment of different people in terms of their gender, role, or department. And this may arise because of biases at the time the employee entered the organization. For instance, employees who have better bargaining power can earn more than those who did not bargain. But again, to ensure consistency and fairness, if a job grade attracts 50,000, everybody should be paid 50,000 unless they are contributing more. A second challenge is changes in the industry, that is market volatility, that competitors adjust their payment either upwards or downwards. And that can be disadvantaging our employees if we adjust it downwards. And that can become a compliance issue. Transparency issues, lack of clarity on how we compensate our employees. Opaqueness is common in many organizations. For example, our security officers, those people who manned the gates and the compounds. As an organization, we may be paying each employee through their managers like 30,000. But what gets to the security person is 9,000 or 10. Though there are administrative costs, but we do not expect that money to come that low. And again, it is against the law because 10,000 is below the minimum wage. Payroll errors, I've mentioned that. Budget constraints, and lastly, retention risks, where we are saying that it is difficult to retain people. Why? Because people demand more pay as they continue working in the organization. And those demands may not be met, and eventually an employee leaves. Best practices in compensation audit: one, regular benchmarking so that we don't have disparities between our own pay and the industry. Two, equity audits, ensure that people are paid fairly for a fair day's work. Three, clarity in our policies, ensure that there is a clear policy framework stipulating who should be paid what, when, and how. And another one is automation of our payrolls so that we can reduce the errors or mistakes made in our payrolls. And lastly, continuous monitoring so that we ensure that one, we are paying according to the market rate, and two, sorry, we are compliant, particularly with the minimum pay. And therefore, what should we be monitoring? One, changes in our laws, particularly on minimum pay, and two, changes in payment levels among competitors. The last aspect for this morning is benefits and employee relations audit. And here we are looking at benefits as non-wage compensations. Wages are monthly payments that we give people, but benefits may not be monthly, and that's why we call them variable pay. This is in addition to what they get paid at the end of every month. What are the types of benefits? Health benefits, and I've given a number of them there, like medical insurance, which can be comprehensive. Wellness programs such as counseling and gyms. And also counseling as well. Counseling, people can be counseled, especially those who are addicted or having challenges in their performance. Secondly is retirement and pensions, where we want to take care of our employees upon retirement. So we have provident funds, like the new one, which is superannuated, then the pension schemes, and lastly, gratuity, a lump sum amount of money paid to employees for work well done over the years. Most gratuities are paid after every 3 years or at the end of a contract. It's a lump sum amount of money which we give to people as an incentive and as a retention strategy. Secondly is leave entitlements. These leaves are stipulated in our laws. For example, maternity and paternity, they are provided in law. But as a benefit, we can extend them as organizations. Like maternity, instead of giving the 3 months, some organizations extend to 6 and others to 1 year. Paternity leave is 2 weeks as provided in the Employment Act, but in some organizations, this leave can be extended to 1 month so that the father of the child can take care of the mother and the child. Paid leave and sick leave vary. For example, somebody goes on leave and he or she is paid for not working. For example, sabbatical leave for university, ideally the lecturer should not be paid, but there are some who say, yes, you are our employee and we can pay you. Or others take study leave. And instead of going without pay, some organizations give this as a benefit. And then there is the sick leave, which can be paid as well. If an employee is sick for a period of 4 days, that is paid. And again, depending on your policy, above 4 days, those extra days will be recovered from your leave days. Then another benefit is financial perks or perquisites, as they call them. These are bonuses, house allowances, and transport. These are benefits that we give employees so that we can motivate them. And then lastly is non-financial, for example, flexible work hours, where employees can report to work late and leave early. Recognition awards, where we are giving a certificate or a commendation letter. And then learning opportunities is where we train our employees so that they can acquire new skills and knowledge. What are the areas covered under benefits audit? One is adequacy. Two is utilization of the benefits. Three, cost effectiveness. Four, compliance. And lastly, equity. Let me talk about utilization. When we are giving benefits like car loans, we give a budget like 100 million so that employees can take that facility to buy themselves a car. But now times have changed, that especially the young people called the Gen Zs may not be interested, for example, in education. If I may take you back, there is this learning opportunities that we have there. They may not be interested or may not be interested in paternity. You might want to give them another type of benefit. So you need to look at how many people are utilizing the benefits that you have. If you have a cafeteria system, you will be able to see how many people are taking which benefit, so that in the next financial year, you focus on those benefits that are taken up by most employees. So you are talking about the uptake of those benefits. What are the benefits what are the metrics that we use in auditing benefits? One is participation rates, where employees are involved in setting out the benefits. Cost ratios, how much are we spending on benefits compared to the payroll? And level of employee satisfaction on the benefits. And lastly, utilization frequency, which I've mentioned, such as healthcare, leave, or pension. Young people like Gen Zs may not be interested in pension because they don't see themselves working until retirement. So you can give them another benefit which they can effectively utilize. Lastly is employee relations audit. Here we are talking about the quality of the relationship between employers and employees. Quality. What are the characteristics of a high quality relationship? One, reduced conflicts. Two, cooperation. Three, teamwork. Four, few or no strikes. If such a relationship exists, then that is quality relationship. Which areas are covered under employee relations audit? One, policy consistency. That in employee relations, we have several policies, such as communication policy, dispute handling policy, and others. There should be clear policies governing those areas. Two, grievance handling. How fair and effective is our grievance handling system? Otherwise, it can spiral into a dispute, and that becomes a serious issue which we may not handle. Union relations, traditionally managers used to see unions as an enemy, and therefore the approach was adversarial. An adversary is an enemy. We do not want to be enemies with our trade unions, but we want to work together collaboratively. And during these collective bargaining agreements, there should be no enmity, ideally. I'm talking about ideals. There should be no enmity. In any case, we are working for the same organization, and therefore we should look at each other as partners. Communication channels are tools that we use to pass information. There must be adequate and effective communication tools so that we ensure that people are aware of what is going on in and around them. Lastly is the engagement climate. This is the environment that we create for employees to participate in decision making. So what do we measure here? 1, collaboration. 2, morale. And 3, employee involvement. What are the key metrics that are used in employee relations audit? 1, the number of complaints in a given period of time that are successfully resolved. 2, disciplinary cases. How many are they? That's the frequency. Resolution time. Disciplinary cases must be resolved as soon as possible so that we don't affect performance. And then whether there are appeals. Are there mechanisms for people to appeal any decision that has been made during the disciplinary process? Staff turnover or retention rates based on employee relations. If there are poor relations between employees and employers, then employees are likely to leave, and that is turnover. Engagement index, that is the level of satisfaction with the labor relations, and we can do that through a survey. Absenteeism rate, that means that employees are not happy with what is going on, and that is why they want to avoid coming to work. And lastly, the union relations, we look at the number of strikes or the number of disputes that have been successfully addressed. Lastly, we look at best practices in employee relations. One of them is fair grievance system so that there is satisfaction with this process. Otherwise, if employees are not satisfied, then they are likely to leave or perform poorly. Secondly, provide feedback to employees on how their relationship is with the management, and this can be captured during regular satisfaction surveys. And then open communication is a must. Please ensure that there is two-way communication where managers and employees share information on a regular basis. Otherwise, if there is no open communication, then employees or managers are likely to keep certain information, which may be disadvantageous to either of the groups. Training is important so that employees know their rights, employees know how to resolve conflicts, or employees know how to communicate. So training on employee relations is important. And this training can start as early as onboarding, which we have said that it's a form of training which employees receive when they join the organization the first time. And lastly, collaboration. Employers and employees should work together as a team. And for that to happen, there must be involvement, there must be consultation, and there must be participation. Participation, involvement, and consultation. In this way, we get to know what the other group is doing, and that we encourage sharing of ideas, sharing of insights, and sharing of experiences so that we can make our organization a better place to work for. So ladies and gentlemen, That is what I had for us this morning. And if there are any questions to be asked, please go ahead. Or if there is a comment you want to make, this is your opportunity. Anybody with a comment, anybody with a question to ask, please go ahead. Okay, apparently there is no question and there is no comment. I wish to thank you all for your participation. I want to wish you a good afternoon, but be sure to join us again at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you and see you.